Good afternoon, my name's Alex Berry and I work for Sutrue. Sutrue has developed a series of suturing devices for medical use and predominantly using additive manufacturing or 3D printing. The devices are to help or replace in what's currently used for manual suturing, and there we go, are now functioning to the degree that we have a very patient surgeon that's been helping us, testing the device in different forms, on different materials, and in different sizes as well. So bear in mind that that particular size is, you'll see a little bit later on, it's about the size of a penny. We have been through 17 different designs to do this, with each one of these designs having around 40 different variants of parts within each one of those sets. We're now at this final one on the end there. And what we have contained within the design of this device is a system that uses rollers to drive a needle around in circles. Now I'm going to try and explain why this took 9.5 years to get to work. And there is a good reason behind it. One of the main reasons is a needle that's used for surgery or for medicine. About a third of the needle is tapered, so it points. So going back to this one, if you imagine that the rollers that are in this configuration are at a set distance. They are a set distance apart, and they drive, in this particular case, the fat part of the needle. So if you imagine that the fat part of the needle is only 2/3 of it, you then have a problem where if your rollers are fixed and you are trying to drive only 2/3 of the needle, you're going to need rollers at all the different points on this arc to be able to keep a hold of the needle. Now you can't obviously do that because you want to have something where you've got a working area. You want to have an aperture where you can actually do your stitching, your suturing. All of the rollers are also driven by gears. The gears are on shafts with the rollers in a particular configuration. And in Engineering 101, the one thing that you always do is when you have two gears working together, you have them at a fixed distance. Gears are always designed to work at a certain distance between the two gears, and that's what everybody else does when they're using gears. The fundamentally important part is you can move gears a little bit apart. And that's what took 6.5 years to work out, is that within this head, we have gears that are sat on shafts with a ball at the bottom, the rollers on top, and as the needle passes through, it gets to separate those rollers. They lean over while the gears still rotate. So you have a constant force through a spring plate, what you call a spring plate, that acts against the shafts that the gears and the rollers are on, that creates a force against the needle, and you get to turn the needle. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's what took 6.5 years and 15 of the 17 prototypes to work out. Now, there's a reason for saying all of this. This is now demonstrating, bench testing the force that we can get behind the tip of the needle, because we're trying to find the equivalent of what's used manually. We want to make sure that the device can do what people do by hand. So these are some of the bench tests that we did to prove that. The point with this is that if we costed how much it would have taken with traditional manufacturing to go through all of the different prototypes that we went through, we've estimated it would have been about 3.2 million. We've spent less than 40,000 because instead of using traditional manufacturing, and this example here was our first prototype, it was milled by a precision milling company. It took 6 months to get that, and £1,500. And it didn't work. It was our first prototype, so it was very costly for something that was never going to function. This unit, which is what we're currently using, so this whole unit, not including the electronics that are inside, a print for all of that is going to be 22, 23 pounds. No more than 30 pounds to have all of the components in the plastics to be able to do new iterations, to play. You can, design-wise, you have the freedom to then not have to consider the manufacturing costs for your prototype iterations. So the internal components of the device that we have now are a range of different, it's a range of produced parts. So if we start here, we have the plastics, which also the casing for the handle, are all 3D printed with our own desktop Formlabs printer. We have metal plates, which are the spring plates that act on the rollers and the gears that are laser or chemically etched. We have rollers that are SLM 3D printed in steel or titanium. We have gears, so that's the spring plates that we use. So this is the range that we went through to find the ideal. Each iteration of each one of the devices that we were working on had a different spring plate. But going back to this one, so we have commercially sourced gears in here, and we also have shafts that are surgical steel that act with the gear, the ball, the rollers, all integrated. And the interesting part of this was finding a way to integrate parts that are printed in one type of plastic, in a resin, FDM printed, or commercially sourced parts, chemically etched or laser etched parts, and having a functioning medical prototype that takes all of those different forms of manufacturing, a prototype, and has them work to a degree where, I'll get back around to it, the smallest head that we have currently is the size of 6 stacked pennies and has 58 components inside of it. So imagine the size of a penny, 58 components that are bonded together and functions. So this is how our rollers come out. So we have commercially sourced gears, but our rollers are SLM 3D printed, currently on a Renishaw, so Renishaw at the back. And the shafts that we have with the ball, which is the whole point of how the device functions, are tongue or eyebrow piercings. So it's sourcing different components from different industries that allows us to now have, this is the small handheld at the top, allows us to have a functioning device with all of this range of different components for the cost that would have just been prohibitive trying to do it before additive manufacturing. This is an example of one of the previous rollers that we had about 4 years ago. So each one of those teeth are a hair's width. They're 40 microns. So that whole unit is only 2 millimeters across. So, and I think that costs us about £100 per roller. If you bear in mind that the innovation you can have in medicine or in medical applications where you can now make components, 15 years ago, you couldn't have combined metal SLM 3D printed parts with a desktop printed 25 micron layer Formlabs part with all of the other commercially sourced parts that we have in here. It lends to being able to look into medical innovation without the fear of the cost that used to be behind it. This is a very kind gentleman, a surgeon that we've worked with who's been very patient for 5.5 years as we've gone through all the different iterations of the device, demonstrating how it can function and its repetitive nature. And he's been instrumental in making sure that we develop the device from the user's perspective. We're now, as was mentioned this morning, we're now on the Formlabs website. We've been using Formlabs since their Kickstarter campaign. We weren't one of the first people that bought them, but we were part of the third loop of people that were buying from the Kickstarter campaign. We were very lucky at the beginning of the year to have been on BBC Click. So again, with Mr. Trimlett, our friendly surgeon, doing some demonstrations for Click. And again, they were iterating the point that in medical prototyping with 3D printing, the cost is less of a fear now. If you have a medically innovative idea, then with additive manufacturing, it's something that doesn't now need to be just the big companies. You can develop something without the fear of prohibitive costs. And some of the gory things that have been sutured, Mr. Trimlett tested it on a heart, on aortic heart valve replacement, I think. Just different materials, different densities, and that's all of the testing that we've done. That's hopefully an explanation of what we're doing with Sutrue. We are hopefully talking to people about getting funding to be able to develop the device further. We have an endoscopic device that we're doing next, so a keyhole device. But again, the keyhole device has to fit down a 10-millimeter tube. And again, with additive manufacturing, it is possible to print a prototype, a functioning prototype, whereas beforehand to prototype something that small would have been an incredibly large cost. We think that possibly we're the first medical device to the level that it is at, where the prototyping has cost less than the patent to the level that we're at the moment. So instead of the development and manufacturing costs, which would have been incredibly prohibitive, it's now actually the patent cost, which is the leading concern when we're looking for funding. So that change, and also the time difference, although it has taken 9.5 years, it's taken 9.5 years to do, I think so far it's about 800 different prototype parts. I remember speaking to somebody who had a single medical unit, one plate that had taken 10 years. So we've done 800 parts in 9.5 years, and they were talking about the development of one single unit in 10. So it might seem like a long time, but it does speed up the process dramatically for medical prototyping. And that's it. That's me.